Well, President Trump said today that this war with Iran could last 4 to 5 weeks, I believe he said.
Yeah, correct. And both sides continue to trade attacks after the killing of Iran's supreme leader on Saturday.
Now, the U.S. and Israel have hit Iranian government and military targets. Iran has retaliated, striking Israel and U.S. military targets in the Middle East. And before we came on the air, at least 6 U.S. service members have been killed. And the president argues that these strikes were necessary, that Iran posed an imminent threat, and many Democrats, including Colorado Congressman Jason Crow, a combat veteran himself, strongly oppose this war.
Donald Trump is very cavalier with other people's lives. He loves pounding his chest and acting tough and talking about the costs of war, but he knows nothing about the costs of war, nor do his billionaire donors.
An Iranian regime armed with long-range missiles and nuclear weapons would be an intolerable threat to the Middle East.
And we want to make sure you have context when it comes to all of this. So joining us now to talk about what is going on is Micheline Ishay. She's the director of the Center for Middle East Studies at DU, and Alex Boudroukas, an assistant history professor at MSU Denver and historian of the Persian Gulf. Yeah, thank you both for being here. Alex, we want to start with you. So 3 days into this battle that we're seeing over there, what are your takeaways when it comes to the strategies that both sides are showing with these attacks and what that means long term?
Well, we've seen, of course, significant bombing on the U.S. and Israeli side. On the Iranian side, there's retaliation against things like oil infrastructure and, of course, against U.S. forces in the region as well. The U.S. side has, of course, been limited to bombing, but it's been extremely significant. We've seen hundreds of Iranian casualties, many of whom are civilian.
So, and whoever wants to take this, let's start with what is the goal as far as your understanding of this? Is it or is it not regime change in Iran?
So in the words of the president, currently it is regime change. There was a possibility for negotiations on the Iranian enrichment. It came to a deadlock, and now that's the very clear-cut position. It could change, of course, because if we see the United States downgrading sufficiently the Revolutionary Guard, it may well be that the president decide to strike a deal like he did in Venezuela when Maduro was removed. So that is also an option, despite the fact, and then it would not go through the regime change. So those are different scenarios that we can explore.
Yeah, and when it comes to the reaction that we're seeing from all of this, obviously groups over there coming in droves mourning. We're also seeing some people celebrating what we are seeing over there. So break down for people why the mixed reaction.
Mixed reaction. Well, there are people who are mourning and they are loyalists to the regime, but the great majority of people have been actually supporting for some changes. We have to remember that there is economic distress in the country, drought, and really a great massacre that has happened just recently in January, that all these compounded created situations were the great majority, I would say, shows the need and the willingness to see some form of change, regime change.
So there is this perhaps romanticized notion that the Ayatollah is gone, so democracy floods in, like we saw with the Arab Spring in 2011. Is that a pipe dream, or is that a real possibility?
I don't find it particularly likely, to be perfectly honest. The Ayatollah was 86 years old and in poor health, so his death does not exactly come as a significant surprise, even if how it happened did. Also, the regime has shown itself in recent months willing to kill many civilians in order to stay in power, and that has not changed. I think the humanitarian price could be enormous for ordinary Iranians, as well as the economic price. But the U.S. does not seem willing to commit the kind of resources that would be necessary to actually topple the regime, at least in any reliable way.
And Natalie, if I may, so Micheline, is there any early sign yet that the Iranian people have responded to President Trump's message that they should come in and they should overthrow the government? Even the Revolutionary Guard, I think he said they should all unite and overthrow. Is any signs of that happening at all?
Well, there was, in fact, a request for them not to do that as of yet before a complete downgrade of infrastructure and security apparatus and facilities. So they are still waiting. Now the question, to what extent do they will feel confident? Those who dance on the streets are already feeling confident. But back to your point, is it the same as the Arab Spring? It is in a way, the Arab Spring fell in 18 days. I mean, Egypt had about 18 days revolution, and the government was gone. The case of Iran is slightly different. You have a much more resilient revolutionary guard that can actually stay in power for longer period, and it's very well entrenched in the society, economically speaking, in terms of the media, and controls a normal level of social activity in society, a much different situations than say Tunisia or Egypt.
All right, we could talk to both of you all day, I know, but we're cutting close on time. Thank you so much for both being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all.